they have all of these relationships, and they could be very healthy and just, but they could be very unhealthy and very unjust. But from the perspective of the compensation of the laborer, of the slave, or the lack thereof, and the compensation of the plantation owner, from all of this perspective, Courtright Davis's claim is correct, I think. In our societies, we need to see emancipation as a key to interpret all social reality.
Right.
So if you start with the Cambole riots of 1881, or the Jose massacre of 1884, and the water riots of 1903, which destroyed the Red House, these are all part of the process of emancipation that is still coming. Each one of these uprisings came because of a collision between a people who felt disenfranchised and a state that was set up for the protection of the business owner. And the collision happened whenever there was a lack of compensation or insufficient compensation for the person to have a decent livelihood. It erupted in these riots. And I think that that's part and parcel of Trinidad and Tobago. And it's part of our national cycle that we do this collision every so often. And if we look at that, the biggest one, the Butler riots in 1937, that was another significant moment in this process. Better wages were now being demanded, and the ex-slave was now turned into a worker. And notice it's 100 years later. This is 100 years later.
Yes.
The ex-slave now turned to worker was beginning to demand a fair share of the economic pie. And if you don't understand Butler riot from the perspective of 100 years later, the laborer is now saying, folks, I can't live on the wage that you're being paid, that I'm being paid. We have to do something better than that. If you can't understand that, then you're not understanding the social history. And then the Black Power movement in the 1960s and 70s, which culminated in a significant milestone, the 1970 protests. Here, I would say the essence of emancipation, the raw nerve of emancipation was touched nationally. In 1937, the economic relationships were touched, but in the 1970s, the raw nerve was touched, because it was really about, will you dare to understand that Black people are human beings, equal in dignity, with equal rights to everyone else who lives in this country? Because that was not self-evident in the 1960s. It was not self-evident. It wasn't self-evident in the banks. It wasn't self-evident in business. It wasn't self-evident in so many places. In the church, it was not self-evident. I mean, the struggles when the first priest brought a steel band into the sanctuary to play, oh, that was not self-evident at all. So the whole society had this ingrained plantation prejudice of the inferiority of the African because the African was a slave, and therefore created this whole superstructure on top of it that both kept the African underdeveloped, under-resourced, underwaged, and therefore and with prejudice in not being equal as a human being. And all of this is a lot of stuff that we're dealing with. But all of this is playing out, and I mean, Butler was just 100 years after. By the 1970s, we've gone on another couple of years. Well, but all of this is just so much part of the national psyche that we call Trinidad and Tobago.